So thanks everyone for coming. Today it's quite a big talk. I've got about 40 minutes to race through this. I pared it back from 300 slides down to something a bit more manageable in the space of time that I have. I tend to talk a lot, and this time I'm going to talk a lot and talk really fast. Welcome to this. My name's Charbel. I'm co-founder of Academy XI. We've been around for about 3 years as Academy XI. My background is in design and tech, and I've worked with previous NECs on and off for a number of years. And I've been around for in digital for about 20 years. And next year is going to be quite interesting. A couple of new things are emerging, so I won't say much more about that. But Academy XI, as Matt was saying, look, we are an education company, and that one doesn't work, so let's focus on this screen over here. Is that, okay. So for us, we're looking at educating companies into the future, and for what that means is we look at a core group of disciplines that are emerging in design and tech, and we deliberately don't look at coding because there's a lot of really great companies who do that. For us, we're looking at things like vocational training. That's the core of what we do. So teaching people skills in a lot of these industries that we're speaking about. Thought leadership, we do a lot of pretty big events in Sydney and in Melbourne. We're opening up in Singapore in March next year as well. So, yeah, sorry guys. Is that working? All right.
Just that screen.
Sorry guys, so if anyone wants to move over there, you can. I'll just sort of try and move over there with you. But I can't do that. So so thought leadership, we're looking at social change. We do a lot of programs currently with a lot of not-for-profits. We did a big program this year with Telstra Foundation. And early education, we're starting to move more and more into seeing what we can do with schools in order to teach kids emerging disciplines. So I'll skip over that. A lot of the companies that we've worked with in Australia, and we've done a bit of work already in Singapore, so it's going to be interesting to see what next year looks like for Academy XI. So for us, we look at 3 key areas in the disciplines that we teach. Emerging tech, human-centered design, and that's the core of everything, and that's what we're going to be speaking about today, is the effect of technology on people. And more we're edging towards business and marketing, so digital marketing, product management, and a whole lot of other new disciplines around there. So the future capabilities, again for us, my background is in human-centered design, particularly so service design and UX are pretty core to what we're doing. And more we're moving to product management, mixed realities, which is VR and AR, digital marketing, and a whole lot of new stuff is coming up in the next 6 to 8 months, which is going to be pretty interesting. So last year I did quite a big talk, and it was called The Future of Everything, and we covered off a hell of a lot of topics. And in that, we looked at the things about our needs not changing. As humans, our fundamental needs do not really change. And this is important for us to think about when we're looking at technology, because it's need-based rather than technology-based. What can the technology do? Great, but what sort of problems is it solving? So we looked at everything from the future of food, the future of water, looking at the future of sleep, future of sex and relationships, transport, education, companies, ownership, the sharing economy, health, what that means, future of security, personal security, online security, freedom, the reality, future of families, future of facts, future of work, self, and that was a whole lot of topics in last year's, and today we're going to be taking a very different angle. There's a few quotes in here which are quite interesting, and a lot of these are great, just for the fun of it. When we look at what the inventions, what it looks like over the years, we're an inventive sort of creature, the humans. We look at what is there, we look at problems, and we use whatever we have available in order to solve problems. And it's a really interesting thing when we look at what's happening right now. I'm going to take you into a bit of a journey. Is that everything has been a derivative of something else. So we've developed something, and we just evolve the thing and get better and better and better at it. So for us, as soon as we've got a new material, the improvement of any sort of material, the technology itself starts to change. And with technology, we start to shift context. And as soon as we start to shift our contexts, what happens then as a result is that we start to alter our behaviour. So, and this is a really important thing now when we start to see what technologies are emerging and what's going to happen with our behaviours. And with all of that is that now humans' expectations increase as a result of the technological change. So we demand more and more and more from companies. And if the companies don't match our expectations, then we move on. And that's one of those realities, because people are quite brutal. The brand loyalty doesn't really happen like it used to. The average age of companies now is something like 15 years, where it used to be the average lifespan was 50 years. And that's going to accelerate even more so. So relevance is absolutely key. So everything, when we look at this, like when we look at sort of the music, the consumption of music through the ages, and we look at it, our need for music hasn't changed. Like, we like to be entertained, we like to listen to things, we like that emotive reaction to listening to something. And when we look at the history of music, and there's a whole lot of stuff that happened before this, but from the radio, and then we moved, the materials changed, and all of a sudden we moved into records, where I could have personal experiences. And then the cassette player started to change things. So instead of having a massive record library, I moved down to the cassettes. And then when we went portable with the Sony Walkman started to pioneer something, all of a sudden music moved out of home into wherever I wanted to be. Then the MP3 player came along, and all of a sudden, rather than having to carry a bag full of music, I've got this little thing that carried more music than possible. And of course the iPod completely shifted everything around entirely. Then the smartphone became this thing that is more than just music, more than just a phone anymore. It pretty much contains everything that we need. And then the smartwatch is going to be a really interesting thing. Spotify just released their smartwatch app 2 weeks ago. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. In terms of the ways of technology, we look at what has happened in the past, really there are essentially 5 waves of tech. We're pretty much in the 3rd wave now, about to hit the 4th wave, and I'll take you through them all. So the first wave of tech is effectively the calculation wave. It was machines were used pretty much they were performing pretty basic functions. RAM, ROM, megabytes, all this sort of stuff in there. It was all about record keeping, calculation and planning. It was a pretty much closed retrieval system, and it was pretty much any computer was in the workplace. Very, very different from now. The first commercial computer. Anyone know what this one was? Okay, so in Leo, so this is interesting. It was in the 1950s. This was the first commercial use of a computer. It's called the Lions Electronic Office, and this was a tea chain in Hammersmith in London, right? So they used this for stock taking for point of sale, and that was in the 50s. It was pretty big thing, and that was just really interesting in the 50s. That was what happened. So in the future, I love all these little predictions. Look up the worst technology predictions of all time. There's hundreds. They're amazing. I love them. So wave 1 was really just the battle for efficiency. So it was about moving things from paper as much as possible. And that's been a fail. We all know that. To trying to get more and more efficient with how we keep records. The second wave of technology was what we're calling the information wave. And so this was the beginning of something completely new. I think we're looking at our phone. We all know this quote. It was pretty accurate. The next wave of the sort of browser-based information was all about links to other pages. So the hypertext transfer protocol, it was 256 colours. Who's been a developer in that time when we were looking at 256 colours? And this was the screen, 640 by 480 was pretty much what we had to design for. And really it was about interacting with content. That's all it was. We were clicking to get to other bits of content. So it was like looking at home, office, internet, cafe, connectivity. Fun fact, the first co-working space actually existed in Boston in 1944. I heard somebody talking about typewriters this morning, and that was a cafe, that was a typewriter cafe, where people would go in and pay by the hour and use typewriters to create manuscripts and things like that. So. And this is another prediction, no one would want a computer in their home. Who's got a computer at home? Just curious. How many? 10? And we know this company that's kind of still quite small. Google, this was all browser-based. Google was one of these companies that started to realise how do we get people accessing information pretty quickly. A whole lot of things happened in that time. The Facebook emerged. Have you guys heard of that? And it was called the Facebook. So this is pretty much what technology looked like before user experience designers started to come to the fore. It was just all about like how do we just get access to the information. And this was again the beginning of the next wave, which was we're in now, which was the social wave. So internet relay chat was the thing that started to get people interacting with each other rather than just interacting with content. So does anyone know who pioneered online payments? So it was the sex industry. And it's funny because they're the ones who are now pioneering things in the virtual reality space. So it's really interesting for something that's so lewd and hidden. They're actually quite advanced in what they do with technology. So what really happened at that point was this perfect storm. Computers started to become really affordable. People started buying computers for home. This whole thing about modems and internet service providers, they started to emerge in the late 90s, early 2000s. Browsers and content started to appear, and then there was this massive public appetite for information. This was that thing called the information superhighway. I still remember Wired magazine talking about this thing called the info superhighway. And so what happened as a result of this was jobs started to change. So all these new jobs started to emerge, which didn't exist in the 90s. And that was really cool. But what Wave 2 was really the battle for the browser. So you had Netscape, Mozilla, Internet Explorer, and I think it was Netscape that sold for something like $4 billion to AOL. And that was the first $1 billion tech purchase. So that was really interesting. And this is a fairly good prediction that the 1996 the internet was going to collapse. Now we've got NBN, so it was true. So it's like, it's awesome. So the third wave of technology, it's what we call the social wave, and it's more than just social media. This is about the power of the consumer coming to the fore, and we know that a whole lot of stuff has changed in this social wave. This was the Wired magazine. God, they must regret this cover. The end of Apple. So it was. No one's got an Apple computer here, have they? Yeah, so a whole lot of companies emerged, seemingly from nowhere. So these companies didn't exist. This was the beginning of disruption, where companies really started to collapse because emerging companies started to see the value of technology and understand that there was something new that can be created for the marketplace. There's some pretty big clues to what the future looked like in amongst this. So there was the news, which is interesting, but Pokemon Go was an absolute phenomenon which started to point to a lot of clues for where we want to head, where consumers want to head into the future. So online shopping, social media, all this sort of stuff started to emerge. So what has changed as a result of this current wave that we're in? How we connect. We've changed. So when you look at this, this is really fascinating sort of stats. So Facebook has got 1.6 billion users. 70% of people log in daily. And this is what's happened as a result of new technology, right? The access, we've got our computers in our pockets, computers in our desks, we've got tablets, and people are logging in daily. And something like Apple's got stats now that we look at our mobile phones at least 100 times a day. We just glance at it to see what's coming up. So that's a really interesting thing. So how we choose, so we're looking at what other people have done in order for us to make a decision. So we don't look at brands to tell us what to buy. We look at other people who've already purchased to see, are they like me? Do I trust them more than I trust the brands? And it's an absolute yes. So what we use has changed. Where we use it, this is another thing, like time predicted remote shopping would just be dead. That was the wrong year. But how we purchase. So we're expecting a whole lot of things all the time. And how we pay, completely shifted. How we eat, all of this has completely changed. So getting home delivery. So you're looking at, I think it was one of these companies, it's HelloFresh, has got a valuation of something like $6 billion, which is pretty phenomenal for a food delivery company. So they're really just starting to challenge. I mean, Amazon's moved into food. They paid a fortune for Whole Foods markets recently. And how we travel is absolutely critical. Airbnb is it's been a massive phenomenon, and it hasn't changed the fact that we travel. It's just what we expect, and we choose based on other people's experiences. How we work has completely shifted. The rise of co-working. WeWork has got a really crazy valuation, and they just keep growing and growing, and more co-working spaces are emerging as a result. How we behave. So China, we've all seen Black Mirror, the whole social proof thing, like our social rankings. China has started introducing that. So pretty terrifying to see that we're giving away a hell of a lot of data, and we're being judged on what we publish publicly and how we behave. So what we read has changed. How we read it has definitely changed. How we love has become an absolutely interesting thing. And you look at how we pray, this whole thing around, we're creatures who look outside of ourselves for something more. Who we worship has completely shifted. So we look at the rise of the celebrity, and we're talking multi-billion-dollar industries here, and people literally worship. Look at the Kardashians, and what are they famous for? Sorry? but you look at it, they're an enterprise, and it's really, really interesting. How we worship has completely shifted. Our laziness has gotten more and more intense, so we just click the thing to say that we like you, we love you. How we focus has completely shifted. Yeah, well, that's big. What we share has become really, really interesting. What we're willing to do for the sake of convenience is pretty interesting. And who we trust. So we're trusting a hell of a lot of information to a few companies all of a sudden. So what does it mean for our future? If anyone's interested in how to create products that people will actually use, I recommend this book. It's pretty dry, but it's actually quite an interesting read around creating habit-forming products. So this guy, Neo Eyal, is continually hired by companies like Facebook to create more and more and get what they call engaging products, which is basically creating tech amphetamine, which is an addiction to our technology and to our platforms. So it's not all bad. We're looking at what technology does do for a global family. We're connecting with people that we wouldn't necessarily connect with frequently. Consumer reviews are great because all of a sudden it's democratizing our choices. The politics and the voice of people, we're starting to see movements happen because of online media. A disaster response has been pretty cool. So we're seeing a whole lot of good things emerging from this. And revolutions are being created. And all of a sudden we're using tech, it sounds really grim, but it's not, because we're able to exchange ideas better. So again, you look at this, all these companies that have emerged, and if we look at just Pokemon Go, who played with Pokemon Go when it first emerged? Yeah, it was pretty big, right? So this is a big indication for the next storm of what people are expecting technology to do for them. So we've got the technology, we've got the much faster processors than we've ever had before, and even though batteries run out with every update that Apple gives, much quicker, but we've got portability, and this is something that didn't happen before. And in amongst that, we've got new content emerging more and more, and this is the missing bit in a lot of these things. But we've got the public appetite for new experiences, and you saw that the phenomena with Pokemon Go. It was touted as augmented reality. It wasn't really, but the public appetite, and it's really interesting now to see how companies are still playing in the VR and AR space. Apple's still waiting for that perfect moment to release their thing. It's been in the patent office for 4 years now, and we know kind of it is going to be a thing, but Apple's still waiting for that perfect moment when the consumer market is ready, which comes back to content. So the types of jobs started to change completely. So, these things, who's a UX designer or service designer in here? Yeah, a few of you, cool. So you'll see all of this. And the big problem is that there's not enough people. And this is a global thing. Like everywhere in the world, there's a talent shortage. And is everyone having difficulty hiring in their current? There's a few nods, yeah. So really, when we look at wave 3, it's a battle for our attention. And you look at the companies that have emerged, and so what they want from us is time. We're in a habit-forming product environment. They want a share of wallet, so everyone wants money from us. Really what they want is mind. So they want to distract us as much as possible. And if you look back at the stats for Facebook, 70% of people logging in daily, we all need to be worried 100 times a day. They're already getting, there's a whole lot of wins for what they're trying to get. So we've reached the limits of our technology. No, that's not true. So the fourth wave is pretty much now, and it's coming up to us really quickly. So we're calling it the tidal wave. This is an onslaught of so much technology, and it used to be that everything was a derivative of something else, but really it's not anymore, because a whole lot of new stuff is happening and it's happening much faster than what we can actually predict what's going to happen. Is AI going to become the thing? Well, you know, we do know, but we don't know. So at some point, it's not going to be artificial intelligence. It's just going to be intelligence, because it's going to start making its own decisions, which is interesting. When we look at what's emerging for us, like, you know, we've got intelligent apps, intelligent things. You're looking at the Internet of Things, the cloud, which is going to get massively upgraded. We're about to move into 5G tech, which is going to be really, really amazing for technologists. You've got conversational platforms. So we're starting to design for the voice, for the fact that where technology is not carried with us, we're not sitting at technology, we're being surrounded by it. Who's got at home a voice-activated thing? Alexa, Google? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I mean, who uses Siri and things like that? You can't use it, I found out. Yeah, you do. So immersive experiences are going to be huge. So we've got blockchain and digital currencies. There was the crypto craze at the beginning of the year. It fizzled. It doesn't mean it's the end of it, but there's new things emerging as a result. Robotics and 3D printing, this is going to start to change a whole lot of things. Cybersecurity is going to be one of the big things that we all need to be worried about. So look at the next 3 years, and there's a whole lot of things from a tech perspective that are really going to shift the human condition and the expectations of what's going to happen. So again, artificial intelligence is not going to be there. So what happens though when we add artificial intelligence with robots? We don't know. You know, there's a whole lot of predictions. We've seen a few things which is kind of scary.
The first law is as follows. A robot may not harm a human being or through inaction allow a human being to come to harm. Number 2, a robot must obey orders given it by qualified personnel unless those orders violate rule number 1. In other words, a robot can't be ordered to kill a human being. Rule number 3, a robot must protect its own existence. After all, it's an expensive piece of equipment. Unless that violates rules 1 or 2. A robot must cheerfully go into self-destruction if it is in order to follow an order or to save a human life.
Cheerfully go into self-destruction. Yeah, that's not going to happen. So, yeah. So ethics is going to become one of those massive topics that will be emerging because, again, the question's already been asked. Just because we have the technology, should we use it? You know, and this is a big topic because human nature is curiosity, and so we're going to go there anyway. We know we're going to go there, and is it too late? So designing value systems. This is the big thing. You know, so just really quick, I just want to show our hands here. So just to show how flawed our reliance on technology could be. So we've got, and this is not a new topic to be explored, but we've got teenagers here, we've got an elderly couple here. We've got this thing called the self-driving car, which is going to be an interesting future for us to consider. So we've got the elderly couple on one corner, we've got teenagers on the other corner. Okay, there's going to be an accident. Who dies? So the car has to swerve and to make a decision to preserve life because it's a robot, right? It's an expensive piece of equipment. It must cheerfully go into self-destruct, but it has to make a choice between one group or the other. This becomes a really tough choice because out of this, like, who would you pick out of this, just at a glance level, to kill teenagers? Who is that? I said the person over 30 years old, of course. Yeah. So who'd pick teenagers to wipe out? There's 4 of you. God, you guys are brutal. So I would too. What about the elderly couple? Elderly? See, that's the standard. That's the standard expectation because it's an emotional decision, right? So we've got a value bias, and value bias is already flawed because when we look at emotional, economic, religious, cultural, political environments, all of them can sway our biases around there. So, you know, personally, if I wanted to pick something, I would look at the future of what these people are going to have as an impact on our society. So elderly couple, they've only got a few years left. They're not going to have that much of an impact. They're not going to have an impact on the school system. They're really a bit on the medical system, but they've only got a few years left. The kids have got like 80 to 100 years to go. That's a massive economic impact, so get rid of them. Yeah, we've got enough. We've got enough of them. Yeah, we could go on forever. Even like, you know, IQ. So if we were looking at IQ, so you know, President Obama had an IQ of 145. So if one of those kids had an IQ of 145, what would you do?
But the kids might die tomorrow too.
They might. They may well. But, you know, Jeffrey Dahmer, do you know him? Serial killer? Ate a lot of people. he had an IQ of 145 as well. So it's kind of like, yeah, what do you do? So robots are decent until we program them. So really, our tools have changed. The thing is that really we're in this position now where no matter what, we can pretty much create reality, like real or perceived. We can shift realities depending on what people want to do with it. A whole lot of problems are being solved as a result of this. And this looks like the next 3 years, and this comes from Gartner. So this is a pretty big prediction of what's going to happen next year, in the next 3 years, of what we've got to focus on. And this I love. We become what we hold. We shape our tools, and thereafter our tools shape us. Because with every wave of tech, we've completely shifted our humanity. The way we show up changes as a result of technology. The future of work is interesting. So most Australians now are studying things that are going to be redundant in the next 5 years. So universities, they're starting to shift, which is a good thing, but a whole lot of jobs just won't exist. People are going to university today, paying a lot of money, spending 3 years, and they'll come out with pretty much irrelevant degrees. Good thing is, like most jobs, a lot of jobs now have a tech-related component. And we're looking at 100,000 new jobs being created in Australia as a result of tech in the next couple of years, which is cool. And it's interesting. I mean, this is a bit of a biased stat because this was commissioned by some freelancing websites. So they're looking at something like 50% of the workforce moving towards freelance. Big clues of the shifting nature of jobs. We all know this. Salaries are increasing pretty rapidly across the globe. And in demand, we've got a whole lot of jobs in demand. But you look at the sort of future jobs, and my God, there's a whole lot of new stuff. And a lot of this is bullshit, like mind transfer specialist. We'll see. But it's kind of interesting to see what the predictions are, because you look at any search anywhere and look at what are the jobs of the future, and you'll have about 1,000 random jobs. But it's interesting. So this does look like digital transformation. There's a whole lot of things that companies have to focus on, and the platforms are necessary. Like content platforms are absolutely critical, but it's what we do with them, and how we're expecting our customers to use technology. So really, we're moving from digital transformation into human transformation, because what is going to happen in the next couple of years is a whole massive change in how we show up as people. And it's not new. So there's a whole lot of different types of tech. So we're looking at things like portable, wearable, insertable technologies, and this is quite real. So the wearable tech, we're quite familiar with all of this sort of stuff. Insertables is something that we either put in ourselves or under our skin to do that. We'll see what we're going to do with our eyes pretty soon, and that's quite true. Insertable tech, implantable tech is a really, really interesting thing. We look at what's happening in the health industries. Pretty phenomenal. Thought activated tech. This is an article that came up this morning. So Boston University, I know in 2001 have been trialling thought activated technology, but now it's gotten to the point, and I really recommend you guys look up this article because it's pretty fascinating what's happening now with thought activated tech. So wave 4, which is where we're emerging right now, is going to be a massive battle for talent. Because you guys, anyone who's playing in the tech space, you're in a good position because it's chronic. The shortage is going to get even more chronic. So we're in the age of experience. It's more so. It's not like nobody up until the last sort of 8 years. It was all about brand marketing, and it's all moved to brand experience. So people aren't going to engage with companies if they're not going to get an experience out of it, whatever that means for them. So it's going to become a cluster word of demand for jobs in there. So talent is just going to be really, really crazy. So in Australia, you look at some of the startups in Australia, we're just looking at space startups, right? 400 space startups just this year, 580 fintech startups. We've raised a fair bit of money, nothing compared to what happens in the States or in Europe, but Australia's really looking more and more at what future tech is doing. So massive opportunities here, but the growth rate is pretty high. In Australia, so I think we're pretty well positioned to what it looks like. And interesting thing is that universities are moving more and more into innovation. So that's going to give us a big clue on what we're going to do into the future. So wave 4 is a battle for talent, and it's barely really started. So when we start to look at what's coming up next, interesting predictions. So DNA as a storage device. Has anyone read much about this? Yeah, so it's really, really cool. So we've got 300 grams of DNA in our body. Okay, so 700 terabytes of data per gram of DNA. So 100 million movies per gram of DNA. Okay, so when you look at that, so already we can store more than currently exists in terms of data in our bodies. Which is, if we get there, Microsoft has invested something like $40 million in looking at DNA as a storage. So right now they can actually store data in our DNA, they can't retrieve it. So that's a problem. So but it's a start. It's an absolute start. It's like, oh wow, it went somewhere. I don't even know if it's true, but yeah, because how do they know it was successful if they can't retrieve it? So click activated, we're looking at touch activated, voice activated, tech data activated, and then, mentioned before is the thought activated. So kind of interesting, kind of scary. So what would we be like if we could actually read each other's thoughts? This would be really interesting, wouldn't it be, from a brand perspective as well, from a marketing perspective, if we actually knew what people were thinking. So the reason, Facebook with Oculus, one of the biggest reasons that they bought Oculus is because they know exactly what somebody has looked at. Okay, so they know where to place the ads, and they know how they're going to be placing the ads in mixed reality environments. So the human transformation is gone from portable tech, wearable tech, insertable, implantable, and then an integrated tech reality. So it's going to be an interesting thing. So what happens when our artificial intelligence, our DNA, and our consciousness start to meet? And this starts to get really scary because already we're giving away a hell of a lot of data from just logging with Facebook and all that sort of stuff. But what happens once we start giving access to our bodies and to our minds to these companies? And this was interesting around HIV virus. It's nothing apparently. So what then happens if we get hacked, our bodies? And this is plausible. As soon as we start to move our technologies into ourselves, which more and more people. Does anyone know anyone who's actually inserted chips into their bodies? Yeah, I know a few people who've done it. So the final wave is I think we've read a lot about this. Is about the singularity, where we pretty much become one with the machine. So there's a whole lot of warnings around this once we start to move in this, because it's something that we're not going to be able to come back from if we do go down this path. It'd be really interesting. So, rapid technological change, it's like artificial superintelligence. It's going to happen so fast, we're probably not going to notice it. And, it's the integration of our consciousness. So we do have a choice whether we go there for now. But anyhow, so will it happen? It's interesting because it's already been in existence. So Carl Jung, he's anyone read much of his stuff? He talked about the collective unconscious anyway, so this concept that we're already connected at a subconscious level means that we're kind of sort of edging towards a singularity in any case. And when you start to think about it, when we start to think about how we're quite logical creatures now, but as kids, they start to know things that we kind of forget or we unlearn as we grow up. And who's been in a room where there could be hundreds of people in the room and there's two kids and somehow they just know that there's another kid in the room and they just come to each other? There's something really weird about that. Dogs do the same thing. It's a really interesting that they know from around the corner there's another dog approaching, right? It's partly smell, but there's something really interesting around this. So we do have a choice, so it's all about questioning and curiosity, which is funnily enough what UX designers and service designers do. And we have to ask tough questions. So this is the French, liberté, égalité, fraternité, which is, freedom, equality, and fraternity. We've got a lot of challenges coming up. We've got physical, cognitive, circumstantial, economic, emotional, societal challenges. We've got a hell of a lot of problems to solve. And this is a big interesting thing around technology, is that, yes, it's great, but what problems are we going to start solving with it? That's one thing, we're talking about revolutions. And, I love this because we start to talk about human purpose, and we talk about this a lot at school when we start to talk to our students, and they do come to us because people are looking for more meaning. And anyone who's designing for millennials, that's one of the biggest things that you've got to start to consider, is that they're looking for more meaning. So they're starting to align with companies who have a purpose behind them, who have some degree of meaning. And you look at the skills of the future. So again, the World Economic Forum starts to talk about a lot of these skills, and a lot of this doesn't have anything to do with hard skills. So it's not about coding. It's not about actually designing. Most of this is about collaboration, asking good questions, working with people, and actually looking at problem solving. So there's a whole lot of careers that people could go for. There's, sorry, just let this scroll through. That was much slower than I thought. That's much better. Okay. It's like this is what it starts to look at. So much technology to shape. And remember this quote. So these are the 5 waves, and so when we look at this, okay, the first 2 waves are gods of the machine. So we were creating the machines, and we were shaping what we were doing with it. The next is like God in the machine. So where we're at right now, which is basically the companies who are extracting our data, and we're giving away a whole lot of stuff. And then the next one, if we get there with the singularity, is basically God becomes the machine. And this is a really interesting concept, is that all of a sudden we're worshipping technology, which we're kind of there. Anyway, so anyhow, if anyone wants to contact me, find me on LinkedIn. It's just like I was one of those people who got the first name in there. So thanks everyone. That's it from me.